My name is Stephen Starr. I'm a professor at the University of Missouri. I teach a class here on nuclear weapons, and I also recently published a book on nuclear high-altitude electromagnetic pulse. My question is for Colonel Wilkerson and Scott Ritter. As was mentioned, 3 of Russia's 10 nuclear early warning system radar sites were recently attacked by Ukrainian drones. Considering that these Russian radars are specifically designed to observe incoming nuclear-armed U.S. ICBMs and could not play any role in the Ukraine war, what do you think was the purpose of these attacks, and did the U.S. provide the targeting data for the drones that were used in the attacks?
The answer to your questions, I think, and this is somewhat speculation, but it's informed speculation, is yes. We knew all about it. We even provided targeting data. And why we did it, I have to answer by saying we're insane. They do not have, the Russians do not have the kind of sophisticated array of warning that we have in space. So this is very important to them. This is like our old distant early warning line, which never worked, but theirs works. And it has absolutely no capability of surveilling the battlefield in Ukraine. So what was the purpose of hitting it? I suspect the purpose of hitting it was something akin to the same purpose of taking out Nord Stream 2. It's absurd. It's insane. But this is the kind of thing we do today.
I would back up the Colonel by noting that,
Microphone.
Oh, microphone. Yeah. Thank you. I'm a Marine, so I'm used to projecting my voice without microphones. So, I'll use Air Force technology. But the United States and NATO employ what we call today intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets over Ukraine and around Ukraine. These drone attacks, I don't believe, could have penetrated Russian air defenses without access to real-time intelligence about where these air defenses are deployed, what the radar envelopes are, what the terrain features are, how you can use terrain masking, timing of attack, the specific route of attack. It's a very sophisticated plot that is beyond the capability of Ukraine to do on its own volition. So I agree with the Colonel that the United States was directly involved in the targeting of this. Now the question is, why would the United States do this? And I come back to one of my built-in assumptions is that we think the Russians are bluffing. We believe that if we can put enough pressure on Russia, that we will cause the Russians to quickly seek the negotiating table to bring an end to this conflict. A lot of what we have been doing against the Russians, using the Ukrainians as proxies, is timed to something that's scheduled to take place, I think, next week, the Swiss, peace conference. But the purpose of the Swiss peace conference isn't to seek peace, it's to create a global coalition who can put political pressure on Russia. And so there's a sequencing of trying to build this global coalition to put pressure on Russia and putting Russia in a state where it will respond to that pressure. And so these attacks that have been made against Russia's critical infrastructure, attacks made against Russian civilian targets, are all designed to wear down the resolve of the Russian government so they would respond to this pressure. This is lunacy in the extreme. Russia has a nuclear posture which clearly states that when its critical nuclear infrastructure is placed under threat, to include nuclear threat or conventional threat, that this warrants a threat of existential nature that can legitimately give Russia the green light to use their nuclear weapons in response. Russians aren't bluffing. They don't bluff. The Russians are highly responsible. They have a very mature posture and very mature leadership. Vladimir Putin's been in power for 25 years. You get to know the lay of the land during that time. He is comfortable with where Russia is. He is comfortable with who Russia is. And he is comfortable with Russia's place in the world. He is not going to throw away a quarter of a century's work on a whim, on an urge, on miscalculation. But at the end of the day, when he is confronted with an existential threat, he will respond in accordance with Russian doctrine. And that means nuclear weapons. This is a gross miscalculation on the part of the Ukrainians, on the part of the United States, and on the part of all the allies that we have tried to bring together to put this pressure on Russia. We don't understand Russia, which is why I believe the best thing we can do as Americans is to begin talking to the Russians, begin listening to the Russians, begin learning about the Russians so that we better understand who they are, what they want, and we can make responsible policies based upon that.
Colonel Wilkerson, any thoughts? Was it?
Just
Yes,
reemphasize what Scott just said. I'm told, and I believe it, that Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan cannot talk to Sergei Lavrov. They cannot pick up the telephone and talk to one of the most accomplished diplomats on the face of the earth, Sergei Lavrov. That's absurd. What do you do diplomacy for? Whom do you talk to most urgently with diplomacy? Your enemies, not your friends. Talk to your friends on a cell phone anytime you want to. You talk to your enemies, or your would-be enemies, or your pretend enemies, but you definitely don't forbid your top diplomat from talking to the top diplomat of the country you're most embroiled with and most dangerously embroiled with.
Colonel Black, did you have something you wanted to?
No, I thought I would just add the fact that when it comes to the drone attacks on the radar sites that defend Moscow, this was a coordinated thing. This was not simply somebody from Ukraine, maybe with some permission from some Americans to go ahead and do this, but it was orchestrated because you had the attack on the early warning system. You had the attack on the nuclear bombers. You had the integration and the adjustment of the F-16 jets to make them nuclear capable and nuclear ready. All of these things coming together. Maybe it was an effort to bluff, to raise the stakes on the Russians, or maybe it was simply the way that the Pentagon does to make sure that if they anticipate that the commander-in-chief might take a certain action, that they put things in place to make sure that they're ready for it. In either event, it is a very dangerous thing because it just ratchets up. If you're bluffing, there's always a chance that the other person calls your bluff. And if he calls the bluff, it is Russia's general position that they don't fight a limited nuclear war. Their idea is that nuclear war is an all-out war. We have this idea, well, maybe you can tinker around. Maybe you can have a little nuclear war, and that'll work out, and everybody will back down. Sometimes people don't back down. And to gamble the existence of humanity on whether somebody will back down, it's one thing if you got $50 on a card table in a poker game, but you're actually putting all of humanity on the table. We're the chips, and we've got reckless people gambling our lives with us.